The story of the magically disappearing bad housemate. Right, so I won't name names and stuff just because I don't feel that's right. Prologue. I live in a house of 4 out of the 4. 3 of us lived together in the university-owned accommodation in our first year, and generally enjoyed living with each other, and should any issues arise we would be happy enough to let each other know, and then sort it out easily. The 4th roommate was a friend of one of the people I'd lived with the year prior. He'd given my friend a bit of a sob story as to how he didn't have anyone to live with next year, and this, that, and the other. So our friend offered to let him live with us, and as we barely knew this guy, henceforth known as Pound 4, we took our friend vouching for him as a good sign and agreed. This was a mistake. The first rent payment. So first up we needed to get our first lot of rent in before we were allowed into the house we were renting. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to move in when we were meant to. Me and the other 2 got hours and weeks in advance, so that nothing would get in the way. Not Pound 4. No, this guy left it. We had to get a hold of his mother, by the letting agency, who paid the first rent for him, because he'd just thought not paying rent on time was no problem. It was at this point we realized this year would be made harder by living with Pound 4. We had to move in a week after we originally intended because this guy was lazy and unreliable. Hopefully you'll see a bit of a pattern emerging. Life with number 4. Now living with Pound 4 was not fun. The guy was a proper wannabe gangster. Half the time we couldn't understand what he was saying due to the ridiculous and often unheard to me slang, and I often thought I used too much slang myself. But on the occasion I'd actually be able to sit and talk, he seemed okay. Turns out he shared some common interests to me, video games, comics and other geekish things, though he seemed to hide all this behind his macho appearance, until it was just a conversation between a very small group of us. Before I got the chance to think too highly of him though, he starts ticking off all the cliché bad housemate boxes. He doesn't clean up after himself in his room, which stank and happened to be right next to the front door. Of course this odor greeted any visitor we'd have over, nor in the bathroom, kitchen or living room. He'd just go around and leave a trail of general uncleanliness. Let's get something straight here too. I'm not a clean freak, by any stretch of the imagination. My room's often untidy. I leave clothes on the floor as well as books and such stuff, but I limit this to my room. And I have a limit within my room. No food. I hate moldy food, and will want to throw up when confronted with that bluey-greeny mold. Anyways, back to living with Pound 4. He used things that didn't belong to him. I had plenty of bottles of juice go from nearly full to nearly empty, almost magically without me drinking from them. When I asked him why he was drinking my stuff more than I was, he recalled how in the first week living there he asked if he could have a glass of juice, and my response of, "Sure, help yourself," was interpreted by him as pretty much meaning, "Sure, help yourself whenever you want and don't worry about asking me ever again." Dishes would be used also, and never cleaned, so when we came to use them, we would have to wash both, before and after using them. I started to counter this by just allowing my things to stay dirty until I used them the next day. Therefore whenever he wanted them he'd be met with dirty dishes, and of course he didn't want to clean them at all. Plenty of times I asked him to sort all this out, nicely as well. I'd do the whole please and thank you. Treat him with respect. Hopefully this will make him want to reciprocate this respect. Nah. His response was usually, "Yeah, all sorted out," followed by never sorting it out, until eventually it was just, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah," as he left the room, and then proceeded to not sort it out. The second bill payment. Now unlike the first bill payment he managed to make the second one, albeit by about a day, but nonetheless he made it. Except for one small detail, he paid less than he needed, about 50 less. This then meant when it came to the next day or so of bill paying, our direct debit to the letting agency failed, and as such we were billed an extra fee by the bank as well. When we asked him he claimed to not be aware of how much he needed to pay, despite us telling him via text, and instead of contacting us about his confusion he decided to just put in the wrong amount. He still owes my friend money for making the difference up and the bank's fee. The disappearing act. Here's where things go odd. One day, I come home from classes, expecting to hear him on the PS3 he had on almost permanent loan from another housemate, who didn't have time to play it, or listening to music or having an extremely loud conversation, as he's prone to, but he's not there. This is odd as he was generally always in the house during daytime. I do my own thing, expecting him to come home, but he doesn't. I ask the other housemates. They don't know where he is either. Days pass and we eventually find out via a post on his Facebook that he has gone home completely out of the blue. Just up and gone. He's not left officially, and some of his things are still about the house. We don't know about the bedroom as it's locked, but we know that my friend doesn't have his PS3 back. We also know that due to how the house is laid out, both the internet router and our gas meter are in his room, locked up in his room. So here's what happens. We need to get the landlord over. They unlock his room. I head in to grab my friend's PS3 for him, and check the meter. Also fix the internet because it was on the fritz for some reason at that point. His room was awful. A smell that combined old sweaty clothing, with moldy plates, some of which didn't belong to him, with rotting food on them. The landlord said I had a limited time in the room as they had other engagements, so I had to prioritize and do what I came there for. In the mess of his room I couldn't find my friend's PS3 controller. Luckily the guy had a spare in his own room, so that wasn't too much an issue. Managed to fix the internet issue, and then take the meter reading, meaning we paid an accurate amount of bills, as opposed to the company's estimates, which were often crazy amounts. Epilogue. Returning to the present day. We're coming up to the third rent payment of the year. We've yet to hear anything from him. No texts, no calls, no Facebook contact of any sort either. Despite our best joint attempts, I keep checking our online bank account, and it shows all of our own payments but not his. If we don't get the money, then obviously this will mean serious problems for us. His room's locked again, and fairly soon I'll need the landlord over to unlock the room so I can take the gas meter reading, too. So navigating his moldy food-infested, putrid-smelling, and generally disgusting room should be fun. I never thought I'd say this, but I want £4 back. I'd rather live in a house with a shitty housemate than be kicked out, or fined for not being able to pay our full rent. Update. Right, so this is an update for this story I posted yesterday. Some people wanted to know what came of this, and some gave some good advice for them. Thank you. So as you know by now, £4 has disappeared and rent day is coming upon us fairly soon, and he still has not paid his share of the rent into our joint account. We got in touch with the landlord today, knowing that they'd also want him to pay his rent, and that they would have his home number, so as to contact £4's mother. Luckily the landlord was more than accommodating. They gave us not only his home number but also his address, and the promise that they too would join us in efforts to get a hold on him. So we get a hold of his mother via his home phone number. I wasn't the one who rang, so I can only give you the summary that I was given. About 2 or so weeks ago, sometime around the end of Christmas, £4 had told his mum that he was coming back to live with us again, and get ready for the start of university, and that to her knowledge he was already with us. Of course, this concerned her when we told her otherwise. It was at this point we just couldn't understand what was going on at all. We know he's somewhere, as he'd been posting a series of trivial Facebook statuses the past couple of days prior to us ringing his mum. We didn't have a clue what to think really, especially that now he's not only missing from our house, but also his own home too. The guy has a knack for disappearing, it seems. Fast forward to later today. I don't know who got in touch with who, but the housemate who originally brought him into the picture managed to speak with him over Facebook. He'd been living with a friend for the past few weeks. Why, who, and where are still relative mysteries to us. £4 assured my friend that he'd pay the rent before it was due. Whether or not this is genuine is yet to be seen, but fingers crossed. This story may possibly have a relatively happy ending after all. We're definitely not living with him next year. In fact, the 3 of us other housemates signed up and paid deposits just today for a new house next year, with friends we know we can trust. So that's the first step towards fully washing our hands of this bad housemate.